Hello everybody and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to another episode here in the series. My name is Dominic. I'm the host of the Android Factory. Apologies for being out this week. I have not been feeling too well, so I didn't want to make videos when my voice sounded horrible. But if you remember in the last episode here, we went ahead and implemented this little profile screen here, and specifically this login functionality. So we built out an auth view model here. We have a simple login function. Simple login function here to go ahead and make the necessary calls that we have. We could see we log the user in, and then it's a funky API, but once we're logged in, we can then go ahead and fetch a particular user. So if we see here in the logs really quickly, when we click the login button, we should, okay, apologies for that. If we go ahead and rerun things here, we see our user is null to start with, and then as we go ahead and click the login button, we'll see here that we have a network user. I was already logged in, so clicking the login button didn't do anything, so the log didn't come up, but we could see that it is working as expected. And in this episode, we just want to continue this implementation here, set things up to kind of react a little bit better, and then build out a little bit more to it. So smash the video if you've been enjoying the series so far, smash that like button, and subscribe if you are brand new so you don't miss out on the content. So here we have a data class outlined as what we call our network user, and this maps to the direct JSON that we get back from the login call. Inside of our application state, the store here, because we're operating in an MVI architecture, we're storing a network user. Not really the best idea, right? We want to store domain information in our store, so we really want to update this to be our user object. Now I've gone ahead off screen and just created a user object here, this data class. Nothing too fancy, it just basically mimics the network model, but has a little bit different of a structure here. So it went ahead and kept the ID, the name we pulled out into its own class, and that is let me close this emulator real quick. That is just a data class that has first and last name attached to it. Then we have our username, a phone number, and an address object, and our address object here looks very similar to this address object here. Except we've gone ahead and just flattened out this geolocation that used to be an object inside of address, and instead we're just sticking Latin long straight into the address here. So just kind of furthering the point of separation of network versus domain, we have the ability with this kind of mapper layer to just transition this network user here into whatever structure we want. I've decided on this for just no particular reason, but it's nice and clean and simple, so we're all good. So as you saw me update here, we're going to have a bunch of issues because we've gone ahead and updated the state to just use a regular user, not a network user. So when we go ahead and try to update the store here, we're going to see that type mismatch, we have required a user and we found a network user. And that's because once we do sign in, we then go ahead and fetch one particular user, this guy by the name of Don. So I've named the function fetch Don. But we can see here it is of type response of network user. And so that's where our problem lies here. If we take a look at this function, we have an auth service, fetch user. We try to fetch them by a particular ID. And then, we get back our network user here. So realistically, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to build out this mapping layer. So let's go ahead into our model package. We have a mapper package embedded in there. We're very simply just going to create the user mapper. This will, of course, just be a class. Close some of this. We are going to make use of HILT because, 2022. So we can @inject constructor on our user mapper, and basically we can define a function. I like calling them build from. We have a network user, and then we are going to want to emit an actual user, right? So then we can just very simply say return user, this one, the domain one, and of course we are going to have to fill this information out. I'm going to fill this out because it's not too helpful to watch, and we'll jump back to it. Okay, and so here we have it, folks. We're going to go ahead and just build this out. We have our user. We go ahead and define the ID, the name, the username, the phone, the address of given our network user here. So it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of one of those things, once you build it once, you don't really have to worry about it unless you want to update your structure. But just note that, inside of our domain address, right, we have a field called lat, we have a field called long, and we got it from our network user, that address, the geolocation within that address, and then the latitude and longitude within there. So, we're just flattening things out. This is where if you want to do any kind of sanitation, null checking, handling, do some kind of parsing for some additional reason, you can go ahead and do that. You want to have an enum for something, you can build all that logic into here, and then we just work with our domain user. So the benefit of this and the benefit of using Hilt is we can go ahead and just inject this dependency where it's needed, right? Dependency injection. So inside of our auth repository, we're going to feed this thing our user mapper, right? It's very obvious how we can do that. You can click it here, you can see that it's connected. And so what we want to do here is we want to update fetch.don to not return a response of network user, and instead we want it to return a response of user. So we're just going to say response equals this, and then all we have to do here is just go ahead and return, let's see, so response, okay, so we are running into the problem of needing to convert a response of network user to a response of user. This isn't normally a problem to do, but our project isn't necessarily set up to map one of these responses to another one at this level, mainly because what happens if this API call fails, right? If this doesn't fail, this obviously the body here, as you can see, is a network user that's nullable, right? And in the event that the API call failed, the body will not be there. It will not be present, right? So one thing that we could do is we could, bang this and say we want to return the user mapper.build from like this, but we then are not getting an actual response object. Instead, we're getting the user object from within that. So without diving too deep into this, because I don't want to waste too much time, I think we're going to actually just revert this information here. And instead of using the mapper at the repository layer, we are just going to go ahead and bubble it up one layer. So at this point here, we're just going to then be able to, map things from there. So we will go ahead and inject our user mapper into the auth view model. And then very simply in here, we can just say our user mapper dot build from the body from there, right? And so the point is that if our Don user response is successful, this body should exist. So there is the possibility that this could fail, mainly because we are not handling if it is null or not. So let's see here. Instead of forcing it like that, we can just say Don user response dot body question mark dot let user mapper dot build from it. That should have everything we need at this point. And I think, all right, so we'll just say store, we'll call this application state, so that we can very simply just put it that way, and we are all good, right? So now we're going to go ahead and update our user if the body is present, i.e. if it was successful, and then we can just go ahead and map that down into it. So it's not the most glorious error handling on the planet, but we can go ahead and enhance this down the line because there's some pretty cool things that we can do surrounding error handling and such. This doesn't really change much because we've gone ahead and just logged the user information that we have here. So we can rerun this and we'll just see what ends up coming out. It won't be network user, instead it will be the actual user, domain user. And picking things back up here, we go to the profile, let's open our run tab. We go ahead and click login, and we'll see now that our user is defined the way that we want it to be defined, right? It's our domain user, we have all the information here. Our flow, our live data has been triggered here once it was successful, and we just print that information out, right? But the beautiful part about this MVI Redux style is being able to build a reactive application, right? And so we have a text view right here that we can very easily make use of. So in addition to logging it, let's say our binding.label.text, we can set it equal to, some nice message, welcome back, comma, and then we can take our user, which is it, binding.label.text, perfect, and then we can set our button to be, let's just go with is enabled equals if our user equals null, right? We only want that button to be clickable if we don't have a user at that point in time. Let's go ahead and change this around real quick. Okay, so we went ahead and just renamed things here. So we have set some things up here. So we told our label text to be equal to the user's first name. Otherwise, it will be sign in. And then our button here is reacting to if the user is null or not. So we now have sign in instead of profile, right? And then we go ahead and click our login button, and for some reason our name here is null. Okay folks, that was just a little mishap on my part here, apologize for that, but we'll see sign in here, and then if we open up our, well, we don't need to open up our run tab because we're going to see it available. Once we click the login button here, we do see our application now respond, right? Can't click the login button, we have Don here, this makes a lot of sense, or it's either our user's first name or sign in, and then we have our button state reacting to that as well. The best part is we can go ahead and just bounce around and whatnot and come back, right? And this application remembers the state because it's all stored in memory. So we have this user logged in for all intents and purposes. And, at some later date, if they end up signing out, we can go ahead and, null out that user. And then this button would then become enabled and the sign in text would be there and all that kind of stuff. But this does make for a pretty good use case because if we see our user here has first name Don, last name Romer, right? And that info over the wire, over the internet, comes to us lowercase, right? And we can see that here because Don is just, like just regular Don, not capitalized as you would expect a regular name to be. So the beauty here of our name here is that we can go ahead and say name is going to be name. And then we're going to have first name equals name dot first name capitalize. I know this is deprecated and instead they want us to use something like this, but this is really, really gross and large for no reason. But we can go ahead and just very easily clean this up in a heartbeat. So we're going to go ahead and create our own extension function string capitalize. And this, of course, is going to return a string. And we're just basically going to take exactly this implementation here. And we will just say return this dot replace first char, all that's good. So now we can just call capitalize, and it's using our capitalize, not the Kotlin's capitalize. But we have the benefit of using exactly what they want us to use as far as the logic for capitalizing a particular string. So this is, a really solid example of why the mapper is very helpful. Obviously, if you had control over this API, this should be done on the back end for you, but in this case, it's not, and we have the ability to go ahead and, change that around so we now see Don. And if we look in our run tab here, we can see first name Don, last name Romer, as you would expect as far as, first and last name being capitalized. So that's really, really helpful. And then we can go ahead and, let's see, let's call this, let's create a greeting message. This will be a string and it will be, welcome back, comma, name dot first name, and then we can go ahead and use this value that we've created here. We will say user question mark dot greeting message, and when we go ahead and rerun things here, we will now have some kind of a sentence, some kind of a little message, that just makes it feel a little bit nicer, right? So we go ahead and sign our user in. Welcome back, Don. Obviously, we can clean up this UI and change state here, but you can imagine that basically because of this, we have two different states in this profile fragment that we can handle, and the way we determine how those states are going to, which one we're in is based upon the Boolean if our user is null in the store, right? That either means they're signed in or they are not. I apologize, you hear my cat going wild in the background. He is probably getting a little hungry. So, anyway, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate a like. Comment down below, real fan, if you watched it all the way through. I hope this was helpful. I hope you can kind of see where I'm going here. Very reactive application. We're going to go ahead and continue building this out. We're going to make a much nicer looking UI, a much sleeker UI. Any recommendations as far as what you'd like to see, or suggestions. I'd love to have some feedback and build out some UIs that you guys are interested in. Otherwise, I'll do my best. So with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. Appreciate you all. Thanks.